When you've known someone for more than half your life, you start to believe that nothing could ever come between the two of you. That was how I felt about Fahad. We met when we were just children, two boys playing cricket in the dusty streets of our small town. I remember the first day clearly. I was fielding with a group of older boys, and someone hit the ball so hard it rolled into a corner filled with trash and broken bricks. While everyone hesitated, worried about dirtying their clothes, he sprinted without hesitation, grabbed the ball, and threw it back. That simple act of energy, of not caring about appearances, made me notice him. Later, we ended up sitting side by side when the older kids went off to buy drinks. He introduced himself with a wide grin and asked if I wanted to be his permanent batting partner. That was how our friendship began. From that day onward, we were inseparable. School, play, family gatherings. Somehow, our lives always overlapped. My parents liked him, and his family welcomed me like their own. We studied together, shared secrets, and promised that no matter where life took us, our friendship would remain the same. We used to laugh at those who said that childhood friends often drift apart. Not us, we would insist. We're like brothers. And for years, I believed it with every fiber of my being. As we grew older, our lives began to take different shapes, yet our paths still ran parallel. I was more focused on academics, while Fahad had a natural charm that drew people toward him. He wasn't lazy, but he wasn't as serious about studies either. Still, he had this confidence, this way of talking, that made teachers and classmates alike see potential in him. Where I was cautious and thoughtful, he was daring and spontaneous. Somehow those differences made our bond even stronger. I admired his boldness, and he often leaned on my careful advice. We balanced each other, or so it seemed. By the time we entered college, our friendship was almost legendary. People used to joke that if they saw one of us, they didn't need to look for the other. We had that unspoken understanding that only comes with years of companionship. I would glance at him during a lecture, and he'd already know what I was thinking. He could walk into a room and sense if I was upset about something. When life threw challenges at us, we faced them together. That's why, when the first signs of change appeared, I refused to acknowledge them. I thought our bond was unbreakable. I thought he could never hurt me. The first time I sensed a shift was when we both became interested in the same subject. Not an academic one, but a person. Her name was Sana. She was in our class, quiet yet thoughtful, with a smile that lit up her whole face. I noticed her one afternoon when she asked a question in history class. Her voice carried a kind of calm determination that intrigued me. I mentioned it to Fahad later, casually, thinking nothing of it. He shrugged, didn't say much, and we moved on. But within weeks, I realized he had noticed her too, and perhaps more deeply than I had. At first, it was almost amusing. We teased each other, made light-hearted jokes, and pretended to compete for her attention. But as time went on, I felt his tone shift. What began as playful rivalry became something sharper. He started making small comments about me when she was around, subtle remarks that undermined me. If I answered a question in class, he would laugh and add, "You should hear how long it takes him to explain things outside class." If I offered her help with notes, he'd casually mention how I was always too serious and probably expected a thank you speech. On the surface, it sounded harmless, but I could see the way Sana's perception of me was changing. I didn't confront him at first. I thought it was just a phase, maybe a misunderstanding. After all, we had been friends for so long. How could I accuse him of trying to put me down over something as trivial as a crush? But then, one evening, I overheard something that changed my perspective completely. I had gone to the cafeteria to wait for him, and he was sitting with a group of classmates. I was just about to approach when I heard my name. He was telling them that I was insecure, that I acted like I knew everything, and that I wasn't as loyal a friend as I pretended to be. They laughed, and he laughed with them. I froze in place, stunned. That wasn't playful teasing anymore. That was betrayal in its rawest form. For the first time in years, I didn't know how to face him. I walked away quietly and spent the entire night replaying his words in my head. Maybe he didn't mean them. Maybe he was just showing off. Maybe he was frustrated. I kept trying to justify it, because the alternative, that my best friend was turning into my enemy, was too painful to accept. But deep down, I knew something had shifted between us. And once that shift begins, it rarely stops. The weeks that followed only confirmed my fears. He grew distant when we were alone, but performed friendliness when others were around. He began keeping secrets, forming new groups of friends, and leaving me out of plans we once made together. What hurt most was not losing his company, but realizing that he was deliberately pushing me aside, erasing me from the picture we had painted together for so many years. And Sana? She seemed increasingly drawn to him. His charm, his humor, his easy confidence. It worked on her the way it worked on everyone else. I could see it happening, and I felt powerless to stop it. Still, I didn't confront him. I wasn't sure what to say. Should I accuse him of betrayal? Should I tell him that I felt hurt, left behind and betrayed? Or would that only make me look weaker in his eyes? I chose silence, hoping that perhaps things would return to normal if I gave it time. But silence has a way of creating distance, and that distance soon became permanent. The breaking point came during a group project. We had been assigned to work together with 2 other classmates, and naturally, I assumed Fahad and I would pair up the way we always did. Instead, he immediately aligned himself with the others, leaving me isolated. Throughout the project, he mocked my ideas, dismissed my suggestions, and painted me as overly controlling. In front of the teacher, he smiled and played the role of the cooperative teammate, but behind the scenes, he was actively working to make me look bad. By the end of it, even our teacher commented that I seemed too rigid, too unwilling to collaborate. I knew where that impression had come from. It was his doing. That night, lying awake in my bed, I finally admitted what I had been denying for months. My best friend was no longer my friend. He had turned into something else, someone I could barely recognize. The boy who had once run into a pile of trash to retrieve a cricket ball for me was now running into crowds of people to throw dirt on my name. The laughter we once shared had been replaced by sarcastic remarks at my expense. The trust I once held sacred was now nothing more than a memory. And as much as it broke my heart, I realized something even more painful. He wasn't just drifting away. He was deliberately destroying me. That realization left me with 2 choices. I could continue to suffer quietly, or I could do something about it. For weeks, I wrestled with the decision. Revenge wasn't something I ever considered lightly. I had always believed in patience, in forgiveness, in letting time heal wounds. But this wound was different. This wasn't just about losing a friend. This was about losing myself, about watching someone I trusted turn my world upside down. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, sometimes silence isn't strength. Sometimes silence is surrender. It was then, in those long nights of reflection, that the seed of revenge began to grow. Not the loud, destructive kind you see in movies, but something quieter, more deliberate. If he wanted to paint me as weak, insecure, and unworthy, then perhaps the best revenge was to show him the truth, not through anger, but through calm, measured action. To take back control of the narrative he had stolen from me, to let him taste the bitterness of being underestimated and betrayed, and to remind him in the most subtle way possible that a friendship broken is not so easily forgotten or forgiven. That was the beginning of my journey. The journey of how a best friend turned into an enemy, and how I decided to take my calm revenge. The days after that realization felt strangely heavy. Every small interaction with Fahad carried a new weight, a quiet tension that I couldn't ignore anymore. His laughter, once so familiar, now sounded hollow, almost cruel when directed at me. The things I used to overlook, the sly comments, the dismissive looks, the way he sometimes cut me off mid-sentence, stood out like sharp edges I had ignored for too long. It was as though my eyes had finally adjusted to a truth I had been unwilling to see. And now there was no turning back. I spent hours thinking about what to do. Confrontation would only give him more fuel, more chances to twist my words and paint me as the bitter, insecure one. That was his game, to make me look weak while he appeared strong. If I lost my temper, I would hand him exactly what he wanted. No, that wasn't the path. I needed something quieter, something that spoke not through anger but through control. Calmness had always been my strength, and now it would become my weapon. I began by watching. Observing him the way you might observe a chess opponent before making your first move. It was astonishing how quickly patterns emerged once I stopped excusing his behavior. Fahad thrived on being the center of attention. He liked to be admired, liked to have people see him as the confident leader, the clever friend who could make everyone laugh. But beneath that surface, I noticed his need for approval was fragile. Whenever someone challenged him, even in small ways, I could see the flicker of irritation in his eyes. He wasn't as untouchable as he pretended to be. That was the first lesson I wrote down in my mind. His strength is built on the image he projects, not on who he truly is. If I wanted to bring him down, I didn't need to attack him directly. I only needed to let that image crack, piece by piece, until everyone could see what I already knew. The second lesson came from watching how he treated people outside our immediate circle. To strangers, to new classmates, he was generous with his charm. But to those he no longer found useful, he was dismissive, even cruel. He had a way of making people feel small without them realizing it at first. That worked for him because most people wanted to stay on his good side. But I realized something important. If someone collected those moments, remembered them, and gently reminded others of them, his carefully built reputation would begin to falter. He relied on short memories and surface-level impressions. I, on the other hand, had patience and memory on my side. I didn't rush. Revenge, I reminded myself, is not about striking quickly. It's about striking precisely, at the right time, in the right way. And so, I continued to watch, to wait, and to quietly distance myself from him. Where once I followed him into groups, I now remained on the sidelines, polite but detached. That shift alone began to create whispers. People who were used to seeing us together began to notice the gap. Some asked questions. "Are you two still close?" they'd say. I would smile calmly and reply, "We're just on different paths now." I said it gently, with no bitterness, and in that simplicity, I planted a seed. Because when you do not complain, when you do not defend yourself loudly, people begin to wonder why. Meanwhile, I started building new connections, not forced friendships, but genuine ones with people I had overlooked before. The quieter students, the ones who weren't part of Fahad's circle, the ones who rarely spoke up in class. I began spending more time with them, helping with assignments, listening to their thoughts, sharing my notes without expecting anything in return. Slowly, a different kind of reputation began forming around me. Where Fahad was seen as charming but sometimes shallow, I was being seen as dependable, thoughtful, and trustworthy. I didn't push for it. It simply unfolded through consistency. Fahad noticed, of course. He wasn't the type to miss shifts in attention. At first, he laughed it off, making jokes about how I had become everyone's assistant. But I could see the unease growing. He had always been used to me standing beside him, echoing his presence. Now, I was creating a presence of my own, one that didn't rely on him. The turning point came during another group project. This time, instead of waiting for him to sideline me, I quietly formed my own team. I didn't make a show of it. I simply asked 2 classmates if they wanted to work with me, and they agreed. Our project turned out not just good, but excellent. Thoroughly researched, carefully presented, and delivered with a quiet confidence that surprised even me. The teacher praised us in front of the class, pointing out how well organized our work was. I could feel Fahad's eyes on me as the words were spoken. He smiled, clapped politely, but behind that smile I saw something else. Irritation, maybe even fear. That was when I understood something crucial. For all his effort to make me look small, he needed me to stay small. He thrived on comparison, on being the one who shone brightest. If I built my own light, it would cast shadows on his carefully maintained image. My calm revenge was taking shape, not through destruction, but through quiet construction. But I wasn't done. Revenge isn't only about proving yourself. It's also about letting the other person face the weight of their own actions. And so, I began to gently reflect his behavior back at him, in ways so subtle he couldn't directly accuse me. For example, whenever he interrupted me in conversations, I would pause, smile, and then continue speaking as though his interruption hadn't mattered. When he made sly jokes at my expense, I stopped laughing along. Instead, I'd look at him calmly and change the subject. These small refusals chipped away at his control. Others noticed too. Without me reinforcing his behavior, his jokes sounded sharper, less funny. Without my easy compliance, his interruptions seemed more obvious. The more I remained calm, the more he grew restless. He began trying harder to pull me back into his orbit, sometimes with exaggerated friendliness, other times with sharper digs. But I had learned patience. I responded politely, never cold, but never yielding. And with each calm response, I could see the cracks widening. Still, I knew this wasn't enough. If I truly wanted him to face what he had done, there needed to be a moment, a turning point where everything became clear to others as well. I didn't want to destroy him, but I wanted the truth of his behavior to surface, not as my accusation, but as something undeniable. That moment came sooner than I expected. Our college was organizing a debate competition, and both of us were eager to participate. In the past, we would have joined as a team, but this time we signed up separately. He assumed, I think, that his charisma would carry him through, while I would stumble with my quiet, cautious style. But I had prepared, not just with facts and arguments, but with a steady calmness he couldn't shake. During the debate, I watched as he tried his usual tactics: sarcasm, jokes, flashy lines that drew laughter from the audience. They worked at first, but when it came time to answer serious questions, his responses were shallow, unprepared. In contrast, I spoke steadily, carefully, making sure each point connected to the next. I didn't try to outshine him with drama. I simply let the strength of preparation and clarity speak. By the end, the judges praised my composure and insight, and while he still drew claps, it was clear who had made the stronger impression. The look on his face as the results were announced told me everything. For the first time, he realized I wasn't standing in his shadow anymore. I had stepped out, calmly and quietly, and in doing so, I had shown everyone, including him, that his image was not unshakable. That night, as I walked home, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also sadness. This was someone I had once called my brother, someone I had trusted with my secrets and my dreams. I hadn't sought to humiliate him, only to reclaim what he had tried to take from me: my dignity, my place, my voice. Yet I knew this was only the beginning. He would not let go so easily, and the real test of my resolve was still to come. Because calm revenge is not about one victory. It is about endurance, about holding your ground without losing yourself. And though I had made my first moves, I knew the final reckoning lay ahead. The weeks after the debate felt different. Not only for me, but for everyone who had witnessed it. Something subtle had shifted in the way people looked at me. Before, I had been the quiet one, the background figure beside Fahad's easy charm. Now I was being seen in my own right, someone steady, thoughtful, capable. And that change in perception was perhaps the sharpest revenge of all, because it struck exactly where Fahad had built his strength, in the eyes of others. For a while, he tried to pretend it didn't matter. He laughed it off, made jokes about me becoming the professor of the group, and continued to perform his usual theatrics. But I could see the cracks forming more clearly now. His smiles were tighter, his laughter shorter, and his eyes restless whenever conversations didn't revolve around him. I had learned something essential during this time. When someone depends on admiration, losing even a fraction of it feels like suffocation. Still, I didn't push further. My plan was not to destroy him completely. Deep down, despite the bitterness, there was still a part of me that remembered the boy who had once been my brother in all but blood. Revenge for me was never about erasing him. It was about restoring balance, making him see the weight of his betrayal. And so I continued as I had begun, calm, patient, unshaken. But Fahad, unable to bear the slow erosion of his dominance, made the next move. It came in the form of a rumor. One morning, I overheard 2 classmates discussing me in hushed voices. They said I had cheated in the debate preparation, that I had somehow obtained questions in advance. My first instinct was disbelief. Then I recognized the pattern, the timing, the wording. It was unmistakably his doing. He had planted the seed, knowing how fragile reputations could be. The old me might have confronted him in anger. But by now I understood his tactics too well. Direct confrontation would only make me look defensive, and he would twist it into another performance. Instead, I chose silence once again, but this time with strategy. I calmly went to the debate organizer, requested access to the preparation notes and question lists, and asked them to verify the claim. It took them less than a day to confirm what I already knew. There was no possibility of cheating, as the questions had been randomized at the event itself. When the truth came out, it wasn't me who had to defend myself. It was Fahad. People whispered, not about me, but about him. "Why would he spread that?" they asked. "Why try to pull his own friend down?" The same classmates who once laughed at his jokes now shook their heads. He had tried to trap me, but ended up revealing more about himself than he intended. I didn't celebrate openly. I simply carried on, steady as always. But inside I felt the tide turning. My calm revenge was no longer just about reclaiming my dignity. It was about letting his own actions expose him. The final unraveling came during our last semester. We were assigned a major project that would determine much of our final grade. This time, the teacher decided groups would be chosen randomly, and by some twist of fate, Fahad and I ended up together again. The air between us was thick with unspoken history, but we both pretended civility. At first, he tried to assert control. He assigned me menial tasks, dismissed my suggestions, and attempted to position himself as the leader of the group. The others seemed uncomfortable, aware of the tension but unwilling to step in. I let him take the lead initially, not out of weakness but out of patience. I wanted him to reveal himself, and he didn't disappoint. His disorganization quickly became apparent. Deadlines slipped, research went unfinished, and his once charming improvisations failed to cover the gaps. I waited until the project was nearing disaster before stepping in. Quietly, calmly, I took the scattered pieces, organized them, and worked late nights to rebuild what had been lost. I didn't argue with him, didn't belittle him. I simply did the work, and when the presentation day came, I delivered it with clarity. The group not only passed but received one of the highest grades. The teacher, impressed, commended my leadership and dedication. And though I made sure to acknowledge everyone's contribution, it was clear who had carried the project. Fahad stood beside me, smiling stiffly, but I could feel his humiliation burning beneath the surface. This was the moment of balance I had been waiting for, not because I had defeated him, but because he had defeated himself. His arrogance, his hunger for dominance had left him exposed, while my calm persistence had carried me forward. After that, something in him broke. He no longer tried to mock me in public. He no longer spread rumors or sought to undermine me. Instead, he began to withdraw, his confidence dimming under the weight of his own actions. People still spoke to him, of course, but the glow of admiration had faded. And without that, he was no longer the person he once believed himself to be. I sometimes wonder if he ever realized that my revenge was never a single act, never a dramatic moment of triumph. It was the accumulation of small choices, patience instead of anger, consistency instead of drama, silence instead of accusations. It was letting him walk into the traps he set for me and allowing his own actions to dismantle the image he clung to. There were moments when I felt pity, moments when I remembered the boy running after a cricket ball, or the countless evenings we spent laughing at nothing in particular. But pity does not erase betrayal. Forgiveness may come in time, but it does not erase the lesson. What I learned from him is something I will carry for the rest of my life. That trust, once broken, cannot be restored to what it once was. In the end, my calm revenge was not about making him suffer. It was about showing him, and myself, that I did not need him to define me. That I could stand on my own, stronger than before. That betrayal may wound deeply, but it also teaches resilience. When we graduated, we barely spoke. There was no dramatic farewell, no confrontation. Just a quiet acknowledgement that we were no longer what we once had been. He walked his path and I walked mine. But as I looked back one last time, I realized something. In trying to destroy me, he had only freed me from his shadow. And that, perhaps, was the sweetest revenge of all. So, if you have ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted most, whether it was a friend, a partner, or even family, remember this. You do not need to fight with rage to reclaim your strength. Sometimes the calmest path, the quietest steps, carry the deepest impact. Let patience be your shield, and let time be your ally. Because in the end, Truth has a way of revealing itself, and those who betray will eventually face the reflection of their own actions. All you need to do is stand firm, stay calm, and let them unravel on their own. Thank you for listening to this story. If it resonated with you, if you saw reflections of your own experiences within it, I invite you to like this video, share it with others who might need it, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge for more stories like this. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in shouting the loudest, but in staying calm, steady, and unshaken.